Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Been here for like 7 years. I don't like it. I really don't. It was a mistake to move here. And now I'm living with the mistake. Before I came here, everybody was talking up the UK. Before I came here, everybody was going, yes, it's lovely. It's a lovely place. You're going to love it. Please come. It's lovely. And then I get here, I look around, I go, no, it's not lovely. That's a bit of a shithole. And people around me go, yeah, we know it's a shithole. And we're blaming you for it.
Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the dessert course to our weekly feast.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny.
We've got a sort of new baby, don't we, this week?
Is it a baby? Is it a clone? It's an interesting sort of development.
An offshoot?
Yeah, a spin-off of the main midweek episode. And this week, we were lucky this week, it was perfect timing having Layla on. And it was one of those shows where we'd overrun the clock, the recording clock, by quite some minutes. And somebody would have been staring down the barrel of a very tricky edit, so we didn't lose good stuff. But
no, but I mean, that wasn't the reason, was it?
No,
it was something that we had been discussing for a while. It was suggested at an editorial meeting where all our supporters come. It was suggested by a supporter.
That's right.
When we were asking about whether the shows are too long, and someone suggested splitting them out, and we've been talking about it ever since. And I think we had emotional resolve to do it at some point. And then this episode, it contained such good conversation and ran so long that we looked at each other and went, shall we?
It's great when the universe comes together with a plan for you, isn't it? Because you've been working this for weeks.
Exactly.
Boom.
Exactly. Layla was sent by the universe. But I thought they were both really good conversations, actually. And I tend to listen to our stuff more than maybe you do, because, no one goes gratuitously to go and listen to themselves and say,
you
aren't
can't
I
be
wonderful?
Gratuitous listen.
But you know what I mean, because I do the kind of legaling of the episodes and the final quality listen before I upload it, I tend to listen to quite a lot of the stuff we do, and it really makes me feel quite proud. It sounds different to most things that are out there, and all our guests say it feels different. Like the most common comment we get from every single guest after they come on the show is, my goodness, I can't remember the last time I had a real conversation.
That's not accidental, is it? I mean, that's been baked into the DNA of the show since before the very first episode. In a world where we're kind of programmed to do gotchas. It's what we see on TV and what we see in social media and what we see in our print media and online all the time, this gotcha approach. And it really gets in the way of proper discussion. It really does.
And we got a bit of flack at the start for it as well.
That's right.
From people who were like, why didn't you challenge that? Why didn't you push back on this? And it's like, it's not the vibe. The vibe is to tease out, to understand.
Exactly.
Anyway, enough of the self-congratulation. But if you want to support our effort to conquer the world by being terribly reasonable, please consider a monthly subscription for as little as $5 on ko-fi.com/quietrightpod. We pay every contributor and creative that we work with and make every bit of content available free to everyone at the same time, because we believe that good quality information should not be behind a paywall. So help us.
Good. Right. Enough of the Communist Manifesto. Let's move on. What will we talk about today, Alex?
The means of production, Kenny.
Show me your tractors and your left boot.
Look, I want to give some attention to the latest immigration figures released by the Home Office, because they are important politically and economically and have been quite ignored, I think, by quite a lot of the media.
They have. It's a tangentially related topic under the heading of hypocrisy, I suppose, for topic number 2. I think it's worth having a look at Reform UK's reaction to Rachel Reeves being abused this week in the street, in contrast to the relentless bleating about Farage needing £5 million worth of security insurance.
Finally, again, I think tangentially related, we will discuss burnout in politics and more widely, and maybe have some non-expert suggestions for what we do to cope, basically.
Verily our cup runneth over. Let us sup from the cup. Quiet, Riot.
This week, the Home Office released the latest immigration statistics, and they all showed a significant move. I won't say in the right direction, because I think the consequences of reducing immigration have not been adequately considered or explained, but certainly a move in the direction that large swathes of these islands' population seem to be calling for. And yet, also yesterday, 2 surveys were released. The first showed that a majority of people believed the exact opposite had happened. And the second showed that immigration was now the top concern in the country, way above the economy, health, and even defense. Is this an indication of some ugly national trend that refuses to be satisfied? Is it a symptom of our poor information environment? A lesson to politicians not to fight the far right on its terms? A combination of recency and confirmation biases? Or all of the above and other things besides? Kenny, can you set out the spread of the data?
All right, I'm going to summarize it as best I can because there was a lot of information. The headline was that net migration has fallen, and it's fallen very sharply. The ONS estimates net migration at 171,000 in the year ending December 2025. And that's down from a big old peak of 944,000 in the year ending March 2023. So the direction of travel is unmistakable. It's much lower than the post-pandemic peak. But the details matter. Long-term immigration was still 813,000, while emigration was 642,000. That's what gives us that net figure of 171,000 people coming in to the country. Not surprisingly, to listeners of this show, most of the long-term arrivals were from outside the EU, and among them, the biggest reason for coming was still study-related migration, followed by things like work, asylum, family, and humanitarian routes as well. The Home Office figures also show the visa system has changed dramatically in recent years. This stuff is quite important. Skilled worker visas were down 76% from the peak, and that's mainly because things like health and care visas collapsed effectively. Care worker main applicant visas fell from 108,000 to 1,400, and it's off a cliff. And things like sponsored study visa grants were also 37% below the peak. Finally, I think on asylum, which is what the media really focuses on, the picture is a bit more mixed. 94,000 people claimed asylum in the year ending March 26, which was down 12% on the previous year. But 39,000 small boat arrivals were recorded over that period, and that's a little bit higher than the previous year, but it's still 14% below the 2022 peak.
If you look at 2026, because basically last year, it's agreed that there was a lot of very calm weather and that affected numbers.
That's right.
And if you look at this year, so if you look at 2026 all the way to now, to May, and compare it to exactly the same period last year, small boat arrivals are down 40%. And the other really, really important thing is that the asylum backlog is down by almost half, 48%.
That's right. That's the frontline backlog. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. That initial admin, credit where it's due, that the figures look to be legitimate figures. It's not massaging that's going on. Lists are coming down. But there were some other figures out as well, weren't there, Alex? You mentioned a couple of other polls. What did they show?
One poll done by Ipsos, decent sample, top 5 issues, May 2026. And immigration has now taken over from the economy as the top issue. 41% consider that the top issue. Only 34% consider the economy the top issue. Only 15% consider defense the top issue. I mean, that just seems crazy to me.
I know. Does nobody read anything anymore?
And then the other one was a survey by British Future, actually larger sample than usual, of over 3,000 people, asking about perceptions of net migration, whether people thought there was higher net migration in 2025 in reality, there was 2/3 less net migration. And yet the perception of a majority is that immigration went up in 2025. They also split it out by political affiliation. And maybe you would expect that 62% of reform voters thought that immigration had gone up. 53% of conservative voters thought that immigration went up. Remember, there's also a chunk that don't know. So in that reform bid, 62% thought it had gone up, but only 11% thought it had come down. But you also get it as a dominant opinion if you look at Lib Dems, 46 versus 20-odd%. Greens, 44% of Greens thought immigration had gone up versus 26% who thought it had come down. And even Labour, 41% thought it had gone up. Only 29% thought it had gone down. The rest I don't know. So there is obviously something that's distorting people's perception there.
Just as an aside, those two sets of figures tell us perhaps something we don't really want to know about political surveys globally, probably, in that the most honest answer in any of these surveys should actually be the don't knows. Because it turns out that the vast majority of respondents in both of those surveys genuinely didn't know and demonstrated their ignorance by putting down an incorrect answer.
I guess so, but they weren't asking them for a fact. They were asking them, what's your impression of what's happened in the last year? I mean, it's not surprising that that's how it worked out, because the media attention on this has been relentless. And like I said, figures moving in, again, I don't want to say in a positive direction, because I think Britain is storing up huge economic problems for itself by coming off the drip of immigration without really any plan to taper off, and what happens when you run out of labor force. But putting that aside, if this is what you want and every figure is moving in the direction that you want, and you don't just not notice it, you actively believe it's going in the opposite direction, there is something going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, media attention is certainly one thing, because there's no doubt in my mind that if the figures had moved in the other direction, they would be on the front page of every single paper for days.
Without a doubt.
Do you think it is purely a matter of information? Is the information not getting through to people, or is there something else going on?
Well, look, superficially, of course, there's a huge amount of truth in that. Let's acknowledge the existence of racism. Let's wrestle with the often crude political discourse on this topic. And let's not kid ourselves about the often ugly media treatment of immigration as a topic as well. But I think buried in the figures, you've hinted at it, Alex, there's some very real reasons to be concerned as well. And they're not reasons that I suspect the average punter is well versed in. But then again, our listeners aren't average punters. So let's look at one particularly perhaps troubling set of figures. Now, while migration of groups that make positive or broadly neutral economic contributions, we're talking about migrant workers mostly, that number has fallen, but asylum-related migration has remained at similar levels since late 2022. Now, refugees have got lower employment rates, not surprisingly, and equally unsurprisingly, they do tend to need a fair bit of support from the state. That means that the composition of recent migration has become what we might describe as less favourable from an economic standpoint. It's not going to fill the treasury with glee, that's for sure. And this really is because the categories of migration that the government would most like to slash for both political and economic reasons, these are the categories that are most difficult to influence through actual immigration policy. It's incredibly difficult to actually make a difference through policy on these fronts. Let me ask you this. Given that the policy side is so challenging, do you think that there is anything meaningful politicians can do about this? What should responsible politicians be saying to us all right now in light of these new figures?
I mean, it's difficult. I think that there is some value to questioning whether joining in the debate is something that can ever work. It's not the sexiest thing to present.
Yeah.
There is a core of people concerned about immigration for whom the number will never be low enough. And if the number was zero, if the number went to negative, they would start saying, let's just send home some of the ones that came in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
because the deeply rooted belief is that there's a finite pie that is somehow divided, and if other people come here, there's less of the pie for you. It couldn't be further from the truth. If you look at everything that is really at the core of this, so medical services, housing, anything you look at that people are upset that they're not getting to it quickly enough, is an elastic thing that is affected by both demand and supply.
Yes.
So if you end up with a lot less economic activity and a smaller economy and fewer receipts for the treasury, then GP surgeries will close.
Literally.
Fewer houses will be built. There's no doubt about it. There will be less money for schools, less money for public services. So I think that's the perception mistake that a lot of people make. They think that if we have X number of GP surgeries and X number of school places, if I shove out of those a group of people that I see as undeserving, there will be more left for me. The problem is that those people are also part of A, the demand, and B, the money that goes into those services. So if you shove them out, if you don't calculate it right, you will end up with even fewer places per person left behind after they're gone. So my view is that once this tiger raises its head, the best thing to do is to improve all the things that people have an issue with. It's to increase GP places, to increase school places, to make provision of housing better.
Well, I look at the figures yesterday and I see real progress being made in relation to net migration, way too high under the last government, coming right down now to the low hundreds of thousands. And, that is change, and the Home Secretary deserves credit for that change. It's been raised with me a lot on doorsteps this week. They want the sense that they can have confidence again in the system, and I think that confidence is returning from what the Home Secretary is doing. Now, she's bringing forward a further package of reforms, and I agree with the broad thrust of those reforms. Some areas are subject to consultation, and I think we need to find the right balance in relation to those issues. But broadly, I think the job she is doing, as evidenced by the figures yesterday, is the right job and a good job.
I'm perpetually disappointed with ostensibly progressive parties who get involved in this kind of fight, because we know how it ends. You will never win it. Even when every single figure is moving in the direction these people want, they think you made up the figures. I can't tell you how many comments underneath every single piece explaining what had happened to immigration. The vast majority of comments were that the government is making the figures up. People obviously have bought into the concept. They want to believe it. It's not a thing that you will win. It's also possible, Kenny, that immigration has become more visible. I remember seeing a piece about a seaside resort, and they were complaining that since Brexit, instead of immigration going down, it has gone up. When actually, if you looked at that community, immigration had gone down. But what happened is that instead of the hotels employing, European people, let's say, to come and work there, they were employing South Asian people. So looking around, the people of that community may not have been able to identify a Polish person, but they can identify a South Asian person as someone who is in the out group, as they would see it.
Absolutely.
And so suddenly they see more immigration, even though it's gone down.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Truly Hard Seltzer. We're always in touch, but nothing beats actually being together. This summer, grab a Truly Hard Seltzer. Light, bubbly, fruity, and make your dreams come truly. Truly is the official hard seltzer of U.S. Soccer. Visit trulyhardseltzer.com/locations to find Truly near you. Hard Seltzer Beverage Company, LLC, Boston, Massachusetts. Hard Seltzer, 5% alcohol by volume. Please drink responsibly. 21 plus only. Quiet Riot.
We've discussed the media's role in all of these. You're a media person. But are there other reasons, other than the media, other than the political environment, that immigration, you think, has stayed in the spotlight?
Yeah, I mean, the top line is, of course, that axis of politics and media that has decided very consciously to put immigration and asylum seekers in the spotlight and to keep them there for their own benefit as well. So look, let's accept that people may be wrong about the direction of net migration. That's what the statistics that you shared with us showed. But if we were to give them the benefit of the doubt in a very quiet, righty sort of way, it may well be that they're expressing something broader. For example, that they're expressing concerns about pressure on housing, which we know exists, about waiting lists, which we know exists, about low trust, about cultural unease. In other words, immigration is there on the front pages, but it's also becoming a lens through which every other problem, major problem, can be viewed and distorted and discussed as well. So it may well be that a more useful question isn't just, are the public misinformed, but rather, what are the public using immigration to talk about, even if we have to translate it? And look, I'm not that naive. For politicians of a certain stripe, of course, it's far easier to discuss housing and health and culture through the cipher of a common enemy from overseas. The root concerns may be valid, but viewing everything through the lens of immigration warps the entire debate, regardless of whether or not it's genuinely what people are concerned about or whether it is a cipher. I think a closing question then on this topic, because it's quite a heavyweight discussion. If the numbers are falling, but public concern is continuing to rise, do you think that tells us that immigration policy itself is failing, or is it more that the immigration debate is failing?
Immigration policy depends on your policy objectives, right?
Of course.
If the government's objectives are to cut immigration, then immigration policy is plainly not failing. They're actually being very effective in doing the thing that they wanted to do. I think the naivety was that they trusted that somehow people would notice and give them credit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to happen, because the core of that demographic that is attracted to this particular banner issue, because as you said, it is a banner issue. It includes a lot of stuff underneath it. And I think the demographic that's attracted to it are not particularly friendly to this government. So they will never really see things its way, which leads me to the other option, that the immigration debate itself is failing. And I would say demonstrably so, because for me, a sign of the debate failing is that there is no one in any position of power, of authority, arguing the other side. Right. Everyone has accepted the fucking premise that immigration is a bad thing, that what happens to this country when immigrants come in is, the provision of public services becomes less for anyone already here. So everyone has accepted that basic premise. And so unless you pump a massive amount of money into it, all people see is confirmation that yes, that's what's going on. So until someone has really the spine, the integrity, and the political capital to a certain extent, and the moral authority, and the rhetorical facility to stand up and make the argument for immigration, to stand up and tell the country some home truths, that it's a numbers game. We're living longer, we're having fewer children. You are absolutely resolute that your quality of life cannot possibly deteriorate. We see that in the triple lock, most notably. Mm-hmm. And so something doesn't work in that equation, and you have to solve it. And if your solution genuinely is that you're willing to sacrifice your pension to see fewer immigrants, okay, that's the decision the country made. If your decision is to put in huge financial incentives and really support families and really build social housing so that people who want to, can start having larger families and having them earlier, even though that takes quite a few years, obviously, to trickle through, okay, that's your decision, we can implement it. But you can't have this discussion without the trade-offs being understood. You can't have this discussion with a population when the only side being presented is that immigration is bad, and if we cut it, everything will be great. Because then when you cut it and everything is not great, which is exactly what is happening now, people will turn on the next group.
Of course they will.
That they see as less deserving. Yeah. And we will see that. They will turn on the unemployed. They will turn on the people who have health issues. They will turn on the people with disabilities. They will turn on anyone who is seen as an out group.
Yeah, I mean, the politics of immigration isn't governed by the figures, much as we would like these figures to feed rationally into the public debate. That's not how the politics of immigration works. The politics of immigration is governed more by trust, I suppose, by visibility, by local and national pressure, by media framing. And the biggest letdown for me is that the debate, as much as there is a debate, what it's really failing to produce is any level of genuine understanding. And the figures that you shared with us absolutely shone a spotlight on that. There is no understanding of the reality of the situation. And of course, that often is so blooming deliberate because policy is far harder than slogans, isn't it?
Quiet, Riot.
Rachel Reeves hasn't had a lot of good news to share recently, so the last few days were notably full of goodies. GDP went up by quite a bit more than experts expected, showing the UK growing by more than any G7 counterpart. Inflation fell by more than anticipated. The IMF upgraded the UK's growth forecast, despite a very difficult global picture. And the Treasury, even the Treasury, announced some measures to help with the cost of living, including a freeze in fuel duty. Like every chancellor before her, since Hervey de Stanton in 1316, Reeves invited the cameras to a petrol station forecourt to make the announcement. Cue, inevitably, a Farage fan shouting abuse at her for several minutes, demanding she get fucking Starmer out, and calling her a piece of shit. Then came the surprising bit.
I recognise the impact that it has on people here in the UK, and so it is important. Shall we just wait until they've gone? I had a sandwich.
Nigel Farage! You are Nigel! You're ruling the country! Get Keir Starmer out! We've got British flags on and we're going to get arrested! We've got English flags on here, Rachel! We're going to get arrested! Look at Rachel Reeves there with a smile on her face! You're ruling the country! Get Keir Starmer out! What's the big flag?
I love our country. I love our country. I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British. Right. Very good.
Great.
Put that on the telly. Right. Right.
In the least ever surprising development, Reform UK, who have spent, lest we forget, the last few weeks telling us how Nigel Farage needs 5 million quid for security because of the abuse he gets, well, they offered the abusive man a pat on the back, a pint and a peerage. Have double standards always been this bad? Or are we actually seeing an acceleration of anything goes politics? Alex, come on. We're political animals. It's the politics of the street, Gav, isn't it? It's heckling, it's a bit of bad language, it's the occasional milkshake being lobbed. Are things really getting worse, or is it just the fact that there are too many cameras and microphones about these days?
This was an arranged thing, so this would have had cameras on it any time, because it's literally someone inviting the media to a public setting to make an announcement, which is always fraught with difficulty, as you must know as a journalist.
Oh, yes.
Is it worse? Yes. I think it is. There was something about what happened that did not seem like, someone that had no power expressing their frustration to someone with power. To me, it felt like Rachel Reeves was actually quite vulnerable as a woman standing there. They were in a big truck driving behind her. I mean, considering the level of abuse and hatred they were shouting at her, there must have been a part of her that thought, what if they just drive into me? There's also some sexual politics to factor into this. It's not like women have not been in situations where men are shouting stuff at them in the street. And so there's a kind of gender trauma involved in this and generational trauma involved in this that made the whole thing really uncomfortable to me. What I sensed was that social media is kind of demolishing people's behavioral filters.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me. It felt like this guy would normally be on X posting this stuff at Rachel Reeves, and seeing Rachel Reeves in the street thought it's okay to do that here too, to just shout at her, you're a piece of shit. The difference that physical proximity makes simply not factored into it.
I think so.
But good on her for actually coming back. And it ended up being quite a good moment for her, I think. Don't you? I mean,
I think it was a good moment. I mean, look, she has been subject to some very difficult attacks in the House of Commons. I think attacks that landed a more personal blow than this random heckler landed. She's made a fairly tough stuff, even though we've seen her break down when things have really got bad. What really struck me was that it was the lack of the crowd sort of saying, "All right, enough, mate, shush now."
And the journalists, because there must have been, this thing was filmed for several channels. She made the statement several times. There must have been a gaggle there.
Yeah, they're all very cowed these days.
Or busy filming.
Perish the thoughts.
Quiet, Riot. Looking to see what's happening around your home? Ring's battery doorbell helps you track packages and see who's at your door in real time. The Outdoor Cam Plus protects your yard at night with a wide field of view and clearer Retinal 2K video. Or upgrade to 4K cameras and doorbells with Retinal Vision for ultra-clear zoom and detail. Your door, your yard, your home. With Ring, it's protected. Shop cameras, doorbells, and more at ring.com now. Quiet, Riot.
Do you think heckling is a legitimate part of politics? And when does it cross a line?
Look, I've got to be honest. I think it's, despite what we've seen this week, I think it's an essential part of politics. It's that level of engagement and theatre that we need up to a point, in much the same way that anybody who's hoping to be a successful stand-up comedian will have to learn how to deal with hecklers, and indeed how to lean into heckles and turn them to their advantage. I think politicians who go on the stump and haven't done a bit of preparation are inevitably asking for trouble, and they always have been asking for trouble. I mean, heckling's been around as long as elections and campaigning have been around. I think the most famous one was John Wilkes. John Wilkes was an 18th century radical. He had plenty to say, and he was once heckled by a man who shouted, "Vote for you? I'd sooner vote for the devil." To which Wilkes replied, "And what if your friend is not standing?" You go, "Yeah, a round of applause." You take the heckle, you turn it in his head, and you throw it back. My favourite heckle, which I first heard about when I was in Wales, Wales's first woman MP was Megan Lloyd George, of the Lloyd George dynasty, if you like. And she was heckled by a farmer once. And the farmer asked Megan Lloyd George if she knew how many ribs a pig had, to which she replied, "Come up here and I'll count them." Joyous, absolutely joyous. It acknowledges, it twists it, and it throws it back, and it shuts down the conflict as well. So, yeah, I think heckling is a legitimate part of politics, brackets, T's and C's apply. But also, I think the response is a legitimate part of politics. And what we see is the ability to think on your feet, to perform in public well. The sort of things that traditionally we were expected to see politicians shining at in Parliament. They went through public school and good universities so that they could debate well and so they could respond and they could think on their feet. So, yeah, I don't like rudeness. I don't like the crudeness that we saw this week, of course not. But I don't think that detracts from the fact that a good heckle, a well thought out heckle, and a well thought out and a really sharp response adds to the joy of politics in many ways.
Okay, so can I gently disagree with some aspects of that?
Please do.
The first thing that is different now is that every arsehole hopes that the video of them giving Rachel Reeves a piece of their mind will go viral. So there is an added incentive there that is performative, that has nothing to do with asking your question in however forceful a way or expressing your objection, but it's to do with you finding 5 minutes of fame, which I think distorts things slightly. The second thing is that because we are seeing the reaction from Reform, legitimizing this guy, not just legitimizing, glorifying this guy, okay? Now, if a Labour politician has done that, do you remember when Angela Rayner called Tories scum?
Oh, yeah.
And everyone went, "Oh, it's just giving permission to people to come and stab us in the face." And yet, a leader of a mainstream party sees a man calling a woman a piece of shit in the street, and his response to that is not any equivocation. It's not to say that language is inappropriate, I wouldn't have chosen those words, something. It's to say, oh, I want to buy your pint, mate.
Yeah.
You know, that guy's now Nigel Farage's mate. And there is a notable difference on how they treat hecklers at their events. I put together a little package. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll stick a link.
I saw it, yeah, I recommend it.
I'll stick a link in the show notes. They shut it down pretty quickly. And they are first to complain about how unsafe and difficult politics has become and why he can't do surgeries and what, you know, why all of this atmosphere he worries for his representatives and worries for his canvassers. But there's none of that coming back. And that to me seems very Trumpian. So that worries me. It worries me that he claims victimhood for any criticism directed his way, even legitimate questions from the media, and then turns around and actually puts wind beneath the wings of someone who is one step away from being violent. That, to me, seems very Trumpian, and I find it extremely worrying.
Part of Farage's approach is designed, or accidentally will lead to the closing down of legitimate questioning as well, just as we've seen with Trump. And every time with Trump, he says something that's a little bit more abusive. Every time he ratchets up the pressure on the media and the public not to ask probing questions, you know that there's an even worse example just around the corner at the next press conference. And I think that's part of the danger, though. If we react to the clown who was giving Rachel Reeves abuse this week by saying we have to do things to close down people's interaction with politics, in the end, that becomes a victory for the likes of Farage and Trump, because this shouldn't be an either or. It shouldn't be we allow everything, it's a free for all, or we shut everything down. In the real world, there's a huge middle ground where reasonable debate and little bits of humor and a little bit more risk and a little bit more humanity and a little less as well. There's a place where that all exists. And that's, I think, the place that we should be trying to keep our political debate in. And Farage, by complaining at one end that he's at risk and by cheering on one of the more distasteful examples of heckling, he's playing this game. It's an all or nothing. We really have to try not to fall into his trap.
I think that is going on. I think it's true. At the same time, if you were a female politician, if you were Rachel Reeves, would you choose to do another thing in a public space? That's the problem. The problem is not some diktat or some, mandated behavioral remedy. The problem is that what you're saying, especially to female politicians, is you're not safe. Some dick might come up to you and decide to be violent. And I don't think you can separate that aspect of it. I don't think we can sit here and say we want more women in politics. I don't think we can sit here and say, we want equality, and at the same time ignore the danger that a woman would feel. I'm so keenly aware of it. Like if I am walking behind a woman, I know I'm a big guy and I look a bit scary, all right? And if I'm walking behind a woman, I will deliberately slow down or cross the street because I absolutely know from my friends, from my sisters, that they will be thinking, is this stranger danger? So you have to be aware of it. And that guy is not aware of it. And then the other guys in the party he admires tell him, go for it.
Well, that's where the problem is. Politics at this level is very much a team game. And any politician, male, female, straight, gay, whatever their background, who puts themselves out in public knows the risk they run of being shouted down. And sadly, in recent years, we've known that there's a physical risk there as well to politicians of all backgrounds. I think that's important. And that's why it's such a big deal that the party machines themselves treat this sort of behavior seriously. They expect that it's going to happen and they prepare for it. And they make sure that somebody like Rachel Reeves in particular is not A, at physical risk, of course not. And that's a discussion they should be having with the police, quite specifically, if they think there's a physical risk. But B, should also be ready, both as on an individual basis and on a team basis, to step in when anticipated interruptions and anticipated threats like this happen. Because they've happened throughout my lifetime of following politics, and I don't see any sign that they're going to stop happening anytime soon.
Quiet, Riot. Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
Quiet, Riot. On Friday, Greens MP Carla Denyer announced that she would be taking a few weeks off for health reasons. Her letter went on to explain, and I quote, "I want to be open about the fact that what I'm suffering from is burnout and the mental and physical symptoms that arise from it. Burnout is a condition that does not tend to get better on its own if left unmanaged. It can worsen and increase your risk of long-term health problems. So what is burnout and what can we do about it?" I have to say, I had a vague idea, but actually when I looked it up, it wasn't quite what I thought. Was it the same for you, Kenny?
It was a bit. I mean, look, obviously we are not medical professionals, and if you're struggling, go and speak to an expert. Nevertheless, these are issues that, when we get an excuse to talk about them, I think we should talk about them. And burnout is a really good example because it's not just being tired. It's not just having a bad week or needing a biscuit and a lie down. Though, frankly, Britain could build an entire public health strategy on having a biscuit and lying down. It really could. I looked at it. It's a global issue. And the World Health Organization defines burnout as being, quite specifically, an occupational phenomenon that's caused by chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. So there's a whole procedural envelope that this all sits in. And it's got three core features. There's the exhaustion or the energy depletion that we might expect. There's a mental distancing from work, cynicism, negativity, that sort of thing. And then there's inevitably reduced professional effectiveness. Now, importantly, the World Health Organization says that burnout is specifically about the work context rather than being about every form of stress in life. It's not simply I'm busy. It's what happens when prolonged pressure overwhelms a person's capacity to recover. In other words, it's not the case that the battery's low. It's more like the charging port is melted. That was my sort of takeaway from it. Did you take anything else from it when you looked at what burnout was?
I'll tell you what really stuck with me. Stress, prolonged periods of stress at work can bring burnout, but they're very, very distinct. There's a few charities that are set up for that kind of occupational mental health situation, and they have some really helpful guides. And the one I read, the thing that stuck with me was that stress is about too many external demands. So it's about things coming in from the outside that are making demands of you that you're finding it difficult to cope with. But where that passes on to burnout is that it becomes about inner resources. So burnout is not about too much, it's about too little. Burnout is about the fact that you haven't got it in you to cope with any kind of demand. Right. You have gotten to that stage that it's not about an unreasonable volume coming in, but because of the sort of length and consistency of the work stress you've had, you find that you're dried up inside and cannot recover, basically. You can't recharge the battery. So, your port versus battery thing is right, with the only difference that stress, your battery can be on full.
Yeah.
And you can still be stressed because the demands made on you are unreasonable.
That's right.
But burnout is about the battery being consistently depleted and you feeling that there's no way to reset that cycle.
I swear to God, I can't believe these green people, they live in a world that no one else ever contemplated. Everyone goes to work every day. Me and the missus, 10 hours a day. Stress, not a problem. We live with it. Because she gets paid 90 grand a year, right, and she gets a few emails and she gets stressed. Really? This is why the British public is sick to death of our politicians. Have my stress. I build houses for a living. Right? Have my stress.
There was something else that stood out for me when I was looking into this, and I I was looking up what the symptoms were. What should I be looking out for? Not just in myself, but people who I know and I love and I work with. How can I tell that they might be struggling with something like burnout? And, exhaustion, detachment, reduced effectiveness, that's fine. But that in real life looks like a lot of things, I know plenty of cynical people. You work in newspapers for 20 or 30 years. You learn to know cynical people and love them as well. But there was a key distinction, and it wasn't to do with feeling emotionally flattened or headaches or stomach problems. The key distinction was recovery, because ordinary tiredness improves with proper rest. Burnout often doesn't improve with proper rest because the underlying stressor is still there. You can take a weekend or a week off and you can still come back the next Monday feeling like someone has ripped your soul out and stuck a damp cardboard box in its place. And it's that struggle to recovery and get back to a baseline level, an acceptable baseline level on a Monday morning, for example, that really stood out.
I think that's completely fair. And it's probably actually really pronounced for someone like an MP.
Yeah.
Or, for people who are self-employed like us, or people who basically have a personal workload, because sometimes knowing that workload will be there on Monday, in any case, prevents you from switching off and resting.
That's right.
During the weekend. And so it's not like you can even switch off. The organization that is really devoted to this, they suggest, obviously, the easiest thing to do is to really manage your resources so that you don't get there. I know that sounds easy to do.
Yeah.
We're all terrible at doing it, especially me. And I am, I'm in a period where we're talking about it before the last time we recorded. I'm really struggling at the moment also.
Yeah.
I actually found the change of weather and then the change back to cold, and it really affected me in a very strange way, kind of took my feet from under me, and then some very sweet demands from people I love and family ended up kind of adding to something and making me feel like I couldn't cope.
Small things become huge.
Absolutely. Because you think your computer updating becomes a huge, because you think not now, just not now. Don't do this to me now. Like there is some kind of cosmic plot, I guess I should say. And so what they say is that the best way to stop from getting there is the 42% rule. So they say that you should devote 42% of every single time period, however you choose to divide it, to completely non-work rest or hobbies or...
Who comes up with a figure like 42%? I'm stressing over that now.
42? Well, it's not. I mean, yeah, it's 10 hours. Basically.
Yeah, right.
That's because they look at it on a daily basis. I mean, understanding that there are people who work shifts and things like that, or, who might find it easier to segment it in terms of weeks or whatever. So they translate it into a percentage. But it's basically 10 hours a day. And I don't think I've been giving myself 6, to be completely honest.
If you're self-employed, you probably don't give yourself any time because you literally never switch off. Even in your downtime, it's whirring away in the background and sometimes in the foreground as well. Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the takeaway is that you can't tell very often, because I think people become very good at disguising their own struggles. And that, I think, is because when people think they're being helpful, they actually might not be being helpful.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is everyone coming up to you and going, "Are you okay? Do you feel better?" You just want people to hear it and go, "I hear you, solidarity," and nothing, because it's also completely personal, that you often develop ways of hiding it.
That's right.
You don't want the extent. I mean, what I tend to do is if someone comes to me and says, "I know you're struggling. Are you feeling okay? Are you feeling any better?" My instinct will be actually to expend energy to make them feel better.
My favorite quote about this, Alex, comes from when I was looking into mental health and depression for my own reasons years ago. My favorite quote from this, which really shone a light on it for me, came from Robin Williams. And he was talking about his depression. And he said, depressed people don't pretend to be sad. They pretend to be happy.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely right. It took that whole idea of what these sort of mental struggles that manifest themselves in various different ways are, and turned it on its head. And this idea that actually you burn through energy trying to disguise what's going on or trying to make other people happy, trying to normalize everything around you is absolutely true. Circling back to burnout, of course, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of emotional energy in particular. And you can see quite easily how a doom loop would start to happen there, where
absolutely
you spiral.
And, like I said, there are no easy solutions.
No.
There are no universal solutions. There are things that I know work for me. When I notice the signs of, anxiety creeping in, a little bit of the black dog, I know what to do. I know what I need to do because I know which way it will tilt me. So for me is to become quite scrupulous about a regime of personal care, because I know that when I slide into depression, basically, I stop shaving and so, do you know what I mean?
All
I
the
stop
signs
looking after
present
myself.
themselves,
I stop eating well. I stop sleeping well. And so I go into that mode where I treat myself in the same way that I would treat if I were babysitting a baby niece or nephew. I go into protective mode and say, I will protect my nap time. I will make sure I have a bath. I will make sure I eat the right things and eat well, because that kind of act of kindness to yourself can make a difference. It can make you feel more in control. But there's no universal solution.
No,
it's different for everyone.
If you work in an office where somebody is starting to struggle, and as well, and particularly if you're a manager, I think, and you've got responsibility for a team, it's quite easy to think, do you know what, I'll give them some time off to do yoga. Yoga won't answer 500 emails, not unless it becomes sentient. And at that point, we've got bigger problems. But one thing that is very important to remember, I think, is that something like burnout appearing in your team is often feedback from the system itself. Don't blame the smoke alarm for the fire. That kind of is what I'm saying. And that applies to us as individuals as well. When you're starting to slide into that dark place, it's an alarm, and once you've been through it once or twice and you start to recognize what's happening, there's no point in being angry about it, but it is an alarm and it should be paid attention to.
Don't try to make the conversation about you by saying, I have the brilliant solution, or I'm terribly clever and I will solve your problems for you.
That's the worst,
because that's not helpful.
Yeah.
All you can do is what we're doing, actually. Talk about it when it's happening to you, expecting nothing, and make it clear. And just listen to others when they need you. That's all we can do.
Quiet, Riot.
That brings us to the end of another Sunday School. Thank you, as ever, for lending us a little bit of your headspace. We know it's a gesture of trust, and we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. And if you want to show your appreciation for what we're trying to do with this podcast, please don't put it off. Get yourselves over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod and become a paid up monthly supporter. Pretty please.
Now, look out for a very timely episode of Podyssey on Sisyphus and his struggle to get that rock to the top of the mountain, because it turned out to be basically a session in which I give myself therapy. Traditionally, it's the listener that has the breakthrough, but we mustn't quibble. So, and Arthur Snell, over at our sister pod, Behind the Lines, has a corker coming out on Bank Holiday Monday, a bit of a special, on how the only solution to a king's younger brother causing constant embarrassment with his behavior is to drown him in a vat of wine. I am talking, of course, about Prince George of Clarence in the 1450s. What did you think I meant?
I'm off to Majestic right away. 20 barrels of your cheapest plonk, my good man, and send them to Norfolk. Post haste.
It was actually Greek wine he was drowned in.
Was it?
Very good Greek wine, yes.
Anyway, links to both these shows will be in the show notes. In the meantime, enjoy the hot weather, but, sensibly with hats, sunscreen and hydration. Mine comes in pint glasses, of course it does. And we will catch up with you next week.
We love you more than a siesta.
Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simone Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
So that's out right now. and Arthur Snell. Oh, can you hear that?
What was that?
It's an ice cream truck. Did you not hear the ice cream?
I thought it was a pigeon at first. Quick, run out and get your drugs.
Do you know, a friend of mine when I used to work at the Office of Fair Trading, said to me that her parents told her that if the truck is playing the music, it means they're out of ice cream. Which I think to this day is the wickedest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
I love some twisted parental logic.